The Jim and Terry Show, coming to you from the Hobbit Hole in Bob Cajun with the chair in the corner empty. My good friend Jim on his way to holidays, I hope, and I hope all is well. It's not often that you get a chance to be read to. When was the last time that you actually listened to someone reading a story, reading a newspaper article, reading anything? When was the last time you were read to? Was it when you were a child? The value of being read to is often underestimated in our busyness of the social media world, the Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, this. We're given sound bites, 30 seconds or less, a minute, maybe less. How often do you get read to? We used to value time with our children, reading to them all the stories, the Cat in the Hat, whatever books were common to you. As you were growing up, the Narnia Chronicles were read to my siblings and I as we were growing up in the East End of Toronto. Being read to is something that is pretty significant. It's formative. It's how we acquire language when we are not able to read that well for ourselves, especially as toddlers and little ones before our formal schooling begins. Our ability to read is limited and the vocabulary is limited. But that's how we expand. That's how we gain language, is by being read to. So I'm going to do some reading. Part of my journey in my life is to read something that is now called The Good Book, published I think in 2013, 2011 maybe. The subtitle is of course called The Humanist Bible by A.C. Grayling. Grayling is, if I'm reading this correctly, a professor at New College of the Humanities in London. Author of many books, a philosopher, lots of diverse interests, written a lot on the Old Testament, written a lot on Genesis, written a lot on the Bible, written a lot on wisdom, and throwing all of that training together into this book, The Good Book. Sent to me by my dear cousin, I'm going to read an excerpt from the introduction called An Epistle to the Reader. Dear reader, it might be thought vain to offer a work such as this to humankind in the hope that it will be useful, because the diversity of principles, ideas, and taste among people is very great, as is the fixity of our notions and our reluctance to change. But in truth it would be a greater vanity to offer a work for any other reason. Let the sincerity of the intention then be this book's main commendation. No work of this or any kind can please everyone, whatever its ambition. But this one at least gives satisfaction to its maker, of having aimed sincerely at truth and usefulness, and having done so by following in the paths of the wise. Throughout history, the commonwealth of humankind has had master thinkers, whose mighty works are monuments to posterity. It is aspiration enough to be a guide among them, and to take from them resources to promote what is true and what is good. To all who read this book, therefore, if they read with care, may come to be more than they were before. This is not praise of the work itself, but of its attentive readers. For the worth to be found in it will come from their minds. If there is anyone who learns nothing from this book, that will not be attributable to faults in the book, but to that reader's excellence. If readers judge candidly, none among them can be harmed or offended by what is asked of them to consider, and yet all who come hungry to these granaries of the harvest, made their fellows and forebears, will find nourishment here. Every art and inquiry, similarly every action and pursuit, aims at some good. Therefore, the ultimate good has rightly been described as that at which all things aim. If there is one goal of what we do, what we desire for in its own sake, everything else being desired for the sake of this, then that goal must continue our chief and highest good. Seeking knowledge of that cannot fail to have a great influence on life. When archers choose a target to aim at, they are more likely to aim true. Shall we not do likewise by having as our target the discovery and doing of what is right? To determine what the good is and of the best way to know that good is the most important of all our endeavors and is truly the master art of living. Here in your hands is such an endeavor, consisting in distillations of the wisdom and experience of humankind, to the end that reflecting on them might bring profit and comfort. It has been remarked that a person who fishes a stream might find something of advantage to himself there, but he who takes his nets to the ocean might expect greater catches, and from greater depths. In what follows, these great catches are brought before us by fishers of wisdom, returned from the storms as well as the calms of their voyage, and from both near and distant shores. Anyone who rises above his daily concerns in hope of finding and following truth will discover it here. Every moment of the pursuit of truth rewards the pursuer's pains. When seeking it alongside the great company of those who have trodden the paths of life before us. There are gifts, these are gifts, which they have passed back to us, and they have freely given the best of themselves, and their gifts have been freely accepted here in these pages. Other such books have been similarly made, writings of many hands, ancient and otherwise, taken, wrought, arranged, edited, supplemented, and changed, and offered with a familiar purpose in view. Here the procedure has been the same, but the purpose is different. Not to demand acceptance of the beliefs or obedience to commands, not to impose obligations and threats of punishments, but to aid, to guide, to suggest, to inform, warn, and console, and above all to hold up the light of the human mind and heart against the shadows of life. For we live in deeds, not years. We live in thoughts, not breaths. And our time should be counted in the throbs of our hearts as we love and help, learn and strive, and make from our own talents whatever can increase the stock of the world's good. To let light in upon ignorance and falsehood is a service to human understanding. A yet greater service is to show the way to an upland where the view of life is clearer. It is certain, therefore, that most readers will find profit in the following pages if they read with the attention that those pages merit. How can it be otherwise? All times are seasonable to the increase of wisdom, and no time is lost when spent in the company that inhabits here. For this is a good book, as well as a book of the good, its words from the mighty pens, its thoughts from the votaries of the right and true. It is a text made from all times, for all times, in aspiration and aim, the good for humanity and the good of the world. And that is from the introduction to The Good Book, a Humanist Bible. The table of contents follows a similar structure to what you would find in the Bible. Genesis, wisdom, parables, concord, which just means agreement, lamentations or regrets, consolations, sages, songs, histories, proverbs, a lawgiver, acts, epistles, and a summary chapter, much like the book of Revelation, looks forward to what they call the good. What follows is an amalgamation of all kinds of learning over all kinds of years. The good book is an inspired work of insight, wisdom, solace, and commentary on the human condition, and has drawn from the world's great humanist traditions of thought and literature, Western and Eastern alike, consciously following the design and presentation of the Bible itself in the beauty of its language and in its arrangement into short chapters and verses. Acclaimed philosopher Anthony Grayling has crafted an epic, stimulating narrative that ultimately reveals how life, a good life, ought to be lived. Inspired by the thinking of Herodotus, Confucius, Montaigne, Bacon, and so many others, Grayling has distilled the work of hundreds of authors and more than 1,000 texts using the same techniques of editing, redaction, adaptation that produce the holy books of the Bible itself. Their wit, advice, human stories, tragedies, yearnings, love, and consolations recall the Bible in structure. The Genesis, wisdom, parables, concord, lamentations, etc., all of these follow the format and style of the Bible. Following meditations on the origin and progress of the world and human life within it, Grayling focuses on how life could and should be lived, how we relate to one another and the vicissitudes that are to be faced and the joys that are to be appreciated. For a secular age in which many find that religion no longer speaks to them, the good book invokes the greatest minds of human history and the perennial challenge each of these writers present on the challenge of being human. Professor of Philosophy and Master of New College, A.C. Grayling. There you go, part of my reading. Book sent by my dear cousin arrived in the mail, and I have been not quite devouring it, but it is a read, much like you would do the Bible, not really at one sitting. You pick it up and you go through. So what am I working on? The Genesis, the origin stories. If you take out the inferred creation intention of the universe from an isness of God, what would it look like? What would it sound like? What would the role of people and humanity be? What would the evolution and development of all that we see and behold really mean for us? Finding meaning without a God actor causing it all, telling us what to do, when to do it, how we should do it, taking the dogma out of it all, and looking at things from a humanist perspective. The Jim and Terry Show, The Good Book, The Humanist Bible.